Welcome to the station crew. Enjoy your stay.
The security officer in Space Station 14 is tasked with keeping his crew safe from all harm. This can range from stopping a gray tide from breaking a window, all the way up to having to fight off nuclear operatives who are trying to kill everyone. Well, to start, I'm just going to preface this with I'm not using any live gameplay footage. Security officer is an extremely roleplay intensive job. If you're not talking to people, if you're not trying to understand what's happening, you're playing the job wrong. This isn't a job for just you want to fight the bad guy. While yes, you will be doing that, but nobody wants an officer in the game whose only goal is to just hit you with a stun baton and cuff you. It isn't fun for you. Well, it might be fun because you get power, but it isn't fun for anyone else. That's why people end up using the term shitsec. They will harass security all game, and then you're going to make everyone else you're playing with look bad. So I'm not going to go into gameplay. I think it's up to you to decide what type of officer you want to be. But I will explain the mechanics of being a security officer in as much detail as I can. To start, you're going to spawn in security, as like you would any other job. You will spawn with a security belt, which will come with 2 flashbangs, a stun baton, and handcuffs. That is basically all the gear you actually need. And your backpack will have a flash in it, but that's not all that important. It is worth noting that most of your job you will be using non-lethals. And I shouldn't have to explain it, but I see a lot of players do this. Non-lethals are almost the best item no matter what the situation is. Even if a person is shooting at you with a gun, disabling them is still almost always easier than killing them, due to the fact that most people who steal guns or buy guns like syndicates and nukies are going to have armor. And as of right now, there's no stun resistance in the game. So stunning and cuffing is almost always the right option, because A, at least lets you keep talking to people, and B, killing should always be your last resort. And on the Lizard Den server, the rules are very clear about that. That lethals are to only be used when you absolutely have to, and the person is a danger to the crew and needs to be stopped. Anyway, that's enough prefacing. So, to start, you technically don't need to grab any gear. You start with enough stuff to competently arrest basically anyone. So, let's jump right into it. A flashbang. Well, how to use a flashbang. Security starts with security sunglasses. It makes you immune to flashbangs and other flashes like the flash in your backpack. So to use any grenade, and the flashbang included, you must put it in your hand. You press Z to activate it. You'll hear it count down, and then throw it. You could also blow it up in your hand. You could drop it on the floor. You could do all those things. Running around with a flashbang in your hand and letting it explode is actually a very viable tactic to flashbanging everyone around you. But the flashbang isn't always going to work. And even still, even if you flashbang someone, you're going to need to still stun them and then cuff them, because they can still keep swinging at you or shooting even while blinded. So then you go to your next tool, the stun baton. So without harm on, clicking does nothing. And if you turn on harm, you could actually swing it. But you need to be cautious. Hitting somebody like this with the stun baton turned off is commonly called in the game harm batoning. You never want to harm baton somebody, because the second you hit somebody with a harm baton, you're going to have a lot of people bitching and moaning at you. Even if it was 100% an accident, people will be like, oh, look at that, security's trying to kill the person. It's very common for security to get absolutely berated for accidentally freaking turn on the baton. Well, some players also don't even know how to turn on the baton. So if you shift click the baton, it'll say the light is currently off, the charge indicator reads 100%. To turn on a baton, it's just like the flashbang. You press Z. There'll be a nice sound audio, the sprite changes, the model in your hand changes, and if you shift click it, the light is currently on. So, how does a stun baton work? So if you come into, let's just assume you're trying to arrest this person, okay? If you turn off the stun, and you hit them, notice how they're not falling over, and you actually are seeing visual damage? Well, that's because the baton turned off actually does 7 damage a blunt. And that is more than even a punch. So it is slightly more than non-lethal. If you turn the baton on and hit somebody just twice, they instantly get stunned, fall over, and will take 0 damage. Every swing you do with the baton takes away 10% of your charge. That means you have 10 good swings. Just to stay consistent with the stun mechanics, left clicking means you have to be precise, so it looks like my swings are going through him, but it's not working. If you need a wide swing somebody to stun them, you can simply just hold right click and left click, and you don't have to be precise with your swings as long as they're in the AoE of the white indicator, it will hit them. Now, here's the thing though. If you try to stun somebody who just got done being stunned, I'll let them get back up. They'll have stun resistance. See how I hit them 3 times and I didn't knock them over? You do not want to spam stuns. If you stun somebody and they get up and they start fighting you, you're fully in your rights to fight back, and if you have to, crit the person. If they can't be arrested safely and you're trying your best to non-lethally arrest them, you can fight them. You can keep going. I would recommend you get backup or something and try to avoid yourself getting killed, because if you get killed, you can send things way out of control if a syndicate nuke or a syndicate player, not nukes don't really care. If a syndicate player gets a hold of your ID and all your stuff, that's going to make an even bigger headache, and it's something you could avoid. Alright, so I can't turn the baton on anymore after that, because insufficient charge. Well, to charge a baton, it's actually really easy. You just look for one of these rechargers in the ground. Or not in the ground, it's like this one's on the table. You just simply make sure you have harm off, and you put the baton back into it. And it takes a little bit, but even that short time, I already got 1 swing back. So you can just put it in there. Well, in order to get more stuff, this map's a little unique in this aspect, but every security map in general will have a storage room that all security officers have access to. And this, yes, this is a vector, but it has non-lethal mags in it. This map's kind of unique in that regard. That's not a common design. But in the storage room on maps, you will find this thing called a disabler. These are limited among security, and not every officer will be able to carry one just due to the limited amount. You can get more, but they have to be like ordered, for example. And in here, like, I can just grab an extra stun baton. Also, if you like look in your standard issued locker, you can also find backup equipment here. You don't need any of this, so like technically the bulletproof vest is a little bit statistically better than the Kevlar, just due to the fact that it's explosion resistance. And I actually don't even know if this helmet's any better than the default helmet anymore. No, it's identical, so you can pick your helmet based off looks. So don't worry about... I'm not even going to cover the armor and stuff. You can figure that out in game. Well, okay. Now that I have a disabler, let's go over how the disabler works. So as you saw previously, the stun baton will stun in 2 hits. Well, the disabler is a ranged weapon, and the disabler will disable a target in 4. And it still follows the same principle of stun resistance. If they get back up and you shoot them again, it won't be 4, as you can see. The thing you have to be careful about the disabler, though, is it actually does 5 damage of heat every single shot. So if you mag dump somebody who doesn't have armor on, you will half health them. So the disabler is arguably more of a less than lethal option, where the stun baton is totally non-lethal. Disabler is good if a target's running, and being like extra resisting arrest, more troublesome. I don't know why I couldn't find the word for it. And the disabler has pretty limited ammo, so you have to hit 4 out of the 10 shots fairly rapidly in order to actually disable a target. Well, how do you recharge it? Well, it seems like the baton's done. You can see this nifty yellow animation. Recharging disablers and batons, you do it in the same exact way at these recharger stations. Okay, now let's cover how to actually arrest somebody. I showed how to stun. So, let's assume that you actually get somebody stunned. Now, you have to be very quick about this. You need to turn off harm, swap hands, pull out your handcuffs, and left-click it. They are cuffed. Now, here's the thing, though. They could still easily run around. In order to prevent a suspect from running, as soon as you're done cuffing them, you need to control left-click them to drag them. If they're in your hand, they cannot move. Other people can't drag them away, and you can drag them wherever you need to drag them. So, now that I have this suspect in cuffs, you want to find a holding cell. Like this one, for example. So, you can technically drag them all the way in, but in order to push people around, you just control right-click. And you can also put your baton away at this point. In order to search somebody, you just click on them and drag them onto you, and it will open up this inventory menu. You don't need to strip them all of all their clothes. If anything, it's indecent to do so. Trust me, you do not want to make people hate you more than they already will, and Being security is daunting. You're going to get insulted. You're going to be called names. I don't envy the people who play this role. And you can just press Z to look in their backpack, and it's like, oh, well, he doesn't have any contraband. You could just give him the backpack back, or you could just toss it out like that, and you could take off any tools that they can use to break out, and you could take away their PDA just in case they have access. But I wouldn't take away things like radio. I think prisoners have a right to being able to use their radio. I think they could keep their clothes. Anyway, prisoners have a right to certain things. You could strip them entirely if you wanted and put them in their prisoner clothes, but if they're not an extremely dangerous person, then I don't think it's worth it. And in order to let them out, you could, and like if you want, so now that you have them in jail, you want to take their cuffs off, you get to simply left click to take cuffs off. You can press E in the door, and you take the cuffs off in your hand. You can let them go. They are now in jail. They do not have access to this door, and you have the cuffs. That is the pretty standard procedure of arresting somebody. You could bring like one of these evidence lockers over on this map specifically, and open it up and box everything up, just so when they get out, the things that you will allow them to keep, you can just leave there. So when you let them out, they could come out and grab their stuff. It's pretty simple. Another method of arresting somebody that's very common is if you go to your sec tech, you'll find zip ties. And the cool thing about zip ties is when say you forget to take the handcuffs off the person, or like you just want to leave them in their cell. Zip ties, when they get taken off, they don't leave the handcuff item. They just snap, and these are useless. They don't do anything. So, like, say if you forgot to take their handcuffs off, they can't use them against you if they were to happen to, like, slip you or something. Not all that important, not that big of a deal, just a very minor thing you can min-max, I guess, if you want to call it that way. Very quickly, I mean, this is the basic mechanics of being security. There's a lot of, like, nomenclature of the game. There's a lot of items in the game. And, like, I could give a quick example. These two armors, there's a few others in the game as well, but these are the most out there examples. If you ever see somebody wearing all red like this, or all black, this is the nuclear medic, by the way, and this is a common syndicate armor. These people are already dangerous. They are at a higher level of problem than like your typical syndicate agent. They are 100% unknown threat, and they can be dealt with however you want. And the thing is, it hides your identity. So you have their young passenger man. People can hide their identity with this. Unless you are 100% sure that the person wearing this armor is somebody that you know. Like, say, a security officer is wearing it. And I highly discourage wearing contraband for the exact reason for this. If you see somebody wearing these, you don't have to just arrest them. You can actively kill them. These people are the biggest threats to the station. If they're wearing this armor, they have the 100% intention of killing as many people as they can, or at least killing somebody important. So, yes, you could still just shoot them with a disabler like so, and cuff them, and most of the time, they can't do anything. There is a freedom implant that lets you rip your cuffs off, but you shouldn't just metagame and just assume that people know that. But regardless, you could just, if you're allowed access to guns by the warden or the HOS, you can't just normally get guns as a security. Your boss or your warden will have to issue them out. And while I'm on that topic, there are 3 typical alerts in the game. There's green alert, which is the alert the station is in right now. It's the default alert. Green alert basically indicates the station is operating as normally. There is no threats. You shouldn't be walking around with like your stuns and stuff out. You shouldn't be being aggressive to anyone. And you, in absolutely no circumstance, should be having lethals. And you shouldn't have the lethals, and you should definitely never brandish them if you do have them. So, real quickly, I'll set the alert level to blue. Blue alert is the first major step up in escalation between security and the threats. If you read it, the station alert level is now blue. There's an unknown threat to the station. Security is allowed to perform random checks. So on blue alert, it is good procedure. I wouldn't check everyone. Like, checking every single person is just unreasonable. You're going to make a lot of people upset. Just because you're allowed to do random checks doesn't mean you should do it. But I would highly recommend talking to your team. And it's like, oh, we think an engineer broke into this room. Ask people, anyone wearing engineering clothes, can you see in their bag? Can I look into your pockets? Things like that. And very quickly, the other alert level that pertains to security is red alert. Red alert is the highest alert that you will commonly see. It lets you know that there is an armed threat and a lethal threat to the station. You are needing to use, you don't need to use lethal weapons, but they are authorized. And sometimes you might just have to kill someone. You have to be ready for this. So back to this previous example of seeing people like this. You could try to talk to them. I wouldn't talk to this one. This is a nuclear operative. And yes, it's a little gamey to know that. But anyway, it is a roleplay game. You can still try to talk your way through it. But if they're walking around with, I'll spawn it in or something, like, if they have something like this in their hand, that is a Syndicate submachine gun. I mean, it even says that used by infamous nuclear operatives. Or even if they have guns like a Cobra or like an energy sword, for example. And they're walking around wearing dangerous looking armor, and they've killed people, or you see them attacking people. I mean, they're already a lethal threat as is, and you're on red alert. There is nothing that stops you from just doing what you have to. And remember, if you end up critting somebody, and your head of security or the captain don't want them permanently killed, and captains are typically the one you want to default to on this, but heads of security are pretty good to default to as well. You're going to want to take any person that you crit, and hope you should get your boss involved, trust me. You want somebody above you making sure that everything's going well. Even if you know exactly what you're doing, it's still best to follow this like standard operating procedure. But what you want to do is you're going to, even if they're crit, you're going to want to absolutely make sure they're in cuffs. And you're going to want medical staff to treat them. Because you're going to want to bring them back to jail. And it's still cuffed, but you don't want them dying in jail because it's definitely bad procedure to let your prisoners die. So, I hope I explained as much as I could without showing actual gameplay. I probably could still show actual gameplay, but like I said, this role is very, very RP heavy. I can't just tell you, I can't teach how to be a good officer. I could just teach you the mechanics. So, I encourage you to get out there and try it. Try being a cadet. Ask as many questions as you want. And two very basic rules I can give as a security officer is work in pairs. Security is a very tight-knit team and needs to be tight-knit. You're often going to be fighting people who are significantly more geared than you. Chances of finding the nuclear operatives, which are way more geared than you. You need to use your numbers to an advantage, and it's really hard for people to win a fight 1v2. Also, if you're working together, there's way less chance that the person can say that you're abusing them. There's more people to back you up, and all that good stuff. And my second advice is, you don't have to be the hero of the station. You don't have to go after the guy who's clearly going to kill you. You don't have to go after the guy that you don't think you can comfortably catch. If you're out of stun energy, don't just start killing them because that's the only way to bring them back in. It's okay to let people go. You can get them again. If you know their name, you know what they look like, that person's going to be in trouble anyway. This one's a little long, but security is also a pretty mechanically in-depth department in general. And hope you learned something. I'll answer any questions down below or on Discord, DM me, whatever you need to do. And thank you for watching.